The crowd gasped. No one had ever seen this before. A royal guard had just stepped away from his post, not just moved slightly, not just twitched, but walked away. The onlookers stood frozen. Some pulled out their phones, recording what they believed was a historical scandal unfolding before their eyes. One woman whispered, "They never move. They never leave." But he had, and what happened next would change everything. Ethan Carter had worn the scarlet tunic and bearskin hat of the Royal Guard for over a decade. He had seen it all, the laughter of tourists, the taunts, the attempts to make him flinch. But through it all, he had remained unshaken. Discipline was his life. Until today. As he stood in front of Buckingham Palace, the world saw an unbreakable soldier. But inside, he was at war with himself, because today was different. It was exactly 1 year since the worst day of his life, the day he lost his son. Little Tommy had been his world, curious, bright-eyed, always asking questions about the Royal Guard. Ethan had promised him that one day he'd bring him here, show him the palace, and let him see his father stand tall. But that day never came. A sudden illness had stolen Tommy away before his tiny feet could ever touch the palace grounds. And now, standing here, in the very place he had dreamed of bringing his son, Ethan felt something crack inside him. Then he heard it. A child's cry. Ethan's training told him to ignore it. He had been trained to block out distractions, but something was wrong. The cry wasn't playful. It was panicked. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it. A little boy, barely 5, teetering dangerously on the edge of the fountain. His mother, struggling with a stroller, hadn't seen him climbing. One wrong step, and he'd fall, headfirst onto the stone. Ethan's heart stopped. For the first time in his life, he did something that went against every rule, every order. He moved. He ran. The gasps from the crowd felt distant as his boots pounded against the pavement. He reached the boy just as his foot slipped, grabbing him midair before he could hit the ground. The little boy clung to him, crying into his uniform. The mother turned, realizing what had just happened, and collapsed in relief. Ethan, still holding the child, looked into his tear-filled eyes. For a second, he saw Tommy. Silence fell over the square. People weren't sure what they had just witnessed. A royal guard was not supposed to break formation. Ethan stood there, still holding the child, knowing he had just broken one of the most sacred protocols in the monarchy's history. He expected to be arrested, demoted, discharged. Instead, something unexpected happened. A slow clap broke the silence. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire crowd erupted into applause. The mother, with tears in her eyes, held her son close and whispered to Ethan, "You didn't just save him. You saved me." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat, because at that moment he knew he couldn't save Tommy. But today he had saved someone else's son. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Ethan expected consequences. Instead, something incredible happened. The next day, instead of receiving disciplinary action, he was called into the palace. A senior official stood before him. Instead of anger, there was respect in his eyes. "You reminded the world," he said, "that a uniform does not make a man. His heart does." The king himself acknowledged Ethan's act of courage. Instead of being dismissed, Ethan became a symbol of honor, duty, and humanity. And a week later, when he returned to his post, something unexpected happened. As he stood tall, a little boy walked up to him. The same boy he had saved. In his tiny hands was a drawing. It was of a royal guard, not just standing still, but reaching out. "This is you," the boy said softly. "Because real heroes don't just stand. They move when it matters." And for the first time in years, as Ethan looked at that picture, he felt something deep in his chest. Peace. Because Tommy would have been proud. That day, Ethan Carter became more than a Royal Guard. He became a father again, even if just for a moment. And sometimes breaking the rules isn't a weakness. Sometimes it's what makes you a legend.